if you think about human knowledge plus artificial intelligence plus the robotics side, I mean, this is absolutely bigger than the Industrial Revolution as far as I'm concerned.
AI is literally reshaping how we work, how we make decisions, and how we structure our businesses. But the question begs to be asked, in an industry like construction that is built on relationships and trust, do we want to define what AI can, or do we want to define what AI should be doing to transform the business? That's the question we're going to answer here today. Welcome to The Power of Construction. I am Sasha Reed.
And I'm Andy Rampton.
Andy, welcome.
Thank you.
We are here recording in Sydney, Australia. That is why Chris Langiza, my normal co-host, is not with us. But I want Andy, the audience, to get a chance to introduce yourself and to meet you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did prior to your life here at Procore.
Well, first thing to face up to the fact is that you've got a British accent as well as an American accent. You will balance that out in just a second, so bear with us. I come from a very traditional project management background. So I've had over 30 years in the construction industry. I've been lucky enough to work all the way around the world in big projects, small projects, Olympics, primary schools, and everything in between. And most recently, I had amazing experience in the Middle East working on a little project called The Line at NEOM, which was just fascinating, but subject of another podcast, I fear.
I agree. I am holding that one in my back pocket for a day. We can have a conversation around it because there's a lot to unpack there. Well, this conversation we're having today, I'd love for you to go ahead and introduce our guests. And actually, you two have not met till today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, Andy, I'd love for you to introduce us to them and tell us a little bit about why you wanted these two women to be joining us today.
Yeah, surprise. But I think the beauty of this, and I'll introduce you both in a moment, but the AI is such a big subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a need, particularly in the construction industry, not just to learn how to apply AI, but it's to understand AI as well. And without putting the ladies in buckets right now, I think some of that will come through with the introductions. But I think we have the opportunity today to provide our audience with an understanding of the practical application, but also some of the theoretical behind it. So I think it's a great balance, and it's our job today to bring that through in the conversation. So without further ado, let me introduce you. Fiona Wilhelm, Director of Artificial Intelligence. Luckily, we got the right topic for the Wilhelm Group. So Fiona helps businesses navigate the complexities of an AI-driven world. And say businesses, medium to large organizations. Fiona, I think you've worked with the likes of PwC, KPMG, and the others in that space. You've driven AI innovation initiatives impacting up to 10,000 plus employees, which is fascinating. So we'll need to discuss that as well. And I think, going back to my introduction, I think you bring today some of the practical experience, some of the more construction-related experience of how AI can work in concert with those human capabilities that you mentioned at the beginning there, Sasha. So welcome, Fiona. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Rochelle Tognetti, co-founder of the Australian Centre for AI and Marketing. So Rochelle comes with a background as the Chief Marketing Officer of Deloitte in Australia. And the really fascinating thing, again, in context of the introduction, Rochelle comes with a Masters of Neuroscience and Business, which is just...
Interesting combination.
Yeah.
Unusual.
It again gives us an opportunity to explore that theoretical side of AI. So as I mentioned, Rochelle co-founded the Australian Centre for AI and Marketing. Purpose of that is to bridge the gap between AI and the culture shifts required to effectively use AI through the industries in which you work. So again, Rochelle, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here today.
Brilliant to be here. And I think, as you're looking for different perspectives from industries, it's great for us to be here and hearing more about your industry and what you're doing. So thank you. It's a pleasure. We'll consider this an exchange. As it is a global podcast, so listeners will be across the globe as well as here in Australia. So we're excited to have both of you share your perspectives.
So probably a good place to start is a bit of context around the construction industry currently. And McKinsey recently published some figures that suggest that within the next 10 to 15 years, construction globally is going to grow from being a circa $13 trillion industry to as much as a $22 trillion industry. So on the one hand, construction has got a huge opportunity facing it, at least on a global scale. But I love to use the word paradox when it comes to construction, because we've also got some huge challenges at the same time. We have workforce challenges, we have low productivity rates. You often hear the story about construction hasn't really changed since we built the pyramids. But to achieve that opportunity, we have to face down some of those challenges. And one of the statistics that I read recently is that the industry growth rate needs to be 3.2% per annum.
Right.
And we're not getting anything like that at the moment. So you know where this is heading. What are the accelerators of growth in the industry? We know from Procore's Future State of Construction report that 1 in 3 projects run late. 1 in 4 projects go over budget. The people, the humans on our projects spend a lot of their time, as much as 28%, on rework or finding data that should be easily accessible to them. So we have this industry which is faced with challenges. Historically, it's struggled to modernize. I've been talking about we're on the brink of the digital transformation of construction for at least 10 years now, and we're still on the brink. But AI is bringing something different to the industry. And again, our research shows us that AI is probably the fastest growing technology adoption in construction than we've ever seen. And again, in other statistics, we're hearing that 55% of construction leaders are forecasting using AI in their businesses within the next 12 months. So we're in this paradox situation, lots of opportunity, lots of challenges, and lots of promise through the use of AI. So first question to you ladies, and Fiona, I'll come to you first. With a background of being traditionally low tech, what is changing about construction now? What are the circumstances that allow us to, or that are creating this pathway for us to embrace AI and for it to be the thing that might just drag us through that cusp of digital transformation?
My mind is getting cast back to 2016 at this point, where I was working in a Big Four firm, and they had the same issues that you're talking about. This whole thing about digital transformation, it's too hard. Other areas like the healthcare sector also had these same issues. Lots and lots of data, lots of problems trying to, digitize this, make it achievable in terms of the risk that they felt they were facing. So they were running almost like a double train of work. So you're having to do your job and do this transformation at the same time, and it just simply wasn't achievable.
Very familiar.
So
it resonates.
I think that the really good news is that we're in this phase right now where AI can actually help you with that transformation. So it's not only showing you what's possible in the future around things like predictability, it's actually able to take data and actually reclassify it for you. It's able to do a lot of the heavy lifting in the sort of readiness, if you like. So I really believe that we've come to this fantastic tipping point, and thank goodness, because it's been a long time coming. Construction is not the only industry that's been, traditional and stayed traditional because digital transformation was just so damn difficult. So there's things that you can do with artificial intelligence that will absolutely make this a lot smoother journey than it previously would have been.
And Rochelle, we mentioned at the beginning that one of the reasons for having you on the podcast today is because your background and primary topic is marketing, and yet we're working together in the construction environment. So what are the factors that you're seeing from someone who's maybe one step independent of construction that create this pathway for AI adoption?
Gosh, it's an interesting moment in history. We are living through such wonderful, crazy, and overwhelming times. And I think when I consider both my marketing background, as the chief marketing officer of Deloitte, I was leading a team of 250 people through change. And when I think about it through that lens or the neuroscience lens, the other thing I consider and I really empathize with every industry at the moment. And what you're talking about, the construction industry, is completely resonating with the marketing industry. Marketers are busy enough right now chasing down revenue. Chasing down revenue, rebuilding brands. This in many ways feels like the worst time to be transforming an entire organization. But it is absolutely the best time, and it's a non-negotiable. But we also must remember that our leaders and our people, we're not long out of COVID.
Right.
We're not long out of COVID, which was such a significant change, and it accelerated the way we worked in many ways. But there's also some lingering well-being, mental health challenges. We said to our people, everybody out of the office, everybody into the office. We had the great resignation, how we've got a drought in jobs. So we're all going through this incredible period of change. And I think we have to be really easy. We have to go easy on ourselves as leaders, on our people. Recognize that we're going through this enormous period of change. We have to be incredibly cautious to not make decisions based on fear. This represents this incredible opportunity for us to adopt AI and transform the way we work, every aspect. And those that get that right, they're going to have that competitive edge, not just in the short term. This is a long-term play. So I think we need to be mindful of the situation that we're all swimming in. It's challenging for our people. It's challenging for our leaders. But this is a moment to lean in.
I opened up the conversation with a somewhat provocative question around the cans and the shoulds. We can do certain things, and we look at digital transformation as what we can do differently. But I think AI is bringing up a lot of questions. You mentioned fear. I think AI brings up a lot of questions around what should we be doing, and not kind of dipping into the ethical side of this, but more just from the business's standpoint, thinking about business leaders who are being informed almost weekly as to new developments within AI, and having them keep pace with how are they going to make those decisions and deciding between what we can do and what we should do. I think it may be useful if we take a step back and just start with some common definitions, shall we? Fully admit this is for my benefit as well. Just learned about agentic AI last month and still not really fully clear on it. It's a little fuzzy to me. So, Fiona, I want to start with you. When we talk about AI, you've talked about 4 or 5 different...
Yeah, there are 5 different...
5, there it is. 5 different types. Could you kind of just from a definition standpoint, walk us through that and maybe start to define that a little bit for us in terms?
Yeah, sure. So from the perspective of the different types of AI, when we're speaking about AI, generally in the market, people are talking about what's known as large language models, your ChatGPT, that is generative AI. Now, that is a model which is learns through text-based learning. That's how it started out, at least. And there's essentially ways to get it to predict, I guess, from the data that you train it on, what will happen next. Very, very good at understanding from the data that I have, what I've been trained on, what will the next word be. Not very good at things like context, human nuance, context of our business, what we're in the business of doing.
Yep.
And so that's the generative side. The other ones, which I'll give you a quick whistle-stop tour of, are things like simple AI, which is, it can understand things like, you may be familiar with the fact that, a world chess champion was beaten by an AI. That's the simple version of it, and it essentially knows what the next move is. It can't strategize. So it's just knowing, what do I do next based on the information that I have. And then there's things like neural networks, which are things like automated cars, which kind of think like a brain. And I say kind of because there's nothing like a human brain, and there's nothing, the artificial intelligence is called artificial intelligence for a reason.
Right.
So neural networks are essentially looking at how you have to think about how far away you are from something, how fast you're going. So it's many different inputs. And then there's also natural language processing, which is able to translate the voice into messages that it can then respond to. So, things like Siri and, Google Home and things like that. So those assistants that we can use. And so, yes, there's, as I said, lots of different types of AI, but when we're talking about it today, we're normally talking about generative, and also then moving into, which is something that's just helpful for the construction industry, is very much around agentic, which is by definition individual agents that are actually conducted by a human. So you can do huge tasks with armies of agents, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think having that AI fluency is really important. And that's one thing anyone listening to this podcast, if you haven't yet learnt in, start there. Build your fluency. I think just really understanding the basic concepts. But my grandfather turns 100 years on this in 2 months.
Oh my goodness!
And he said to me, "What is this AI thing?" And I was like, "How do I explain to a 99-year-old what AI is?" And I really like Demis from the CEO of DeepMind's definition that it's the science of making machines smarter. The other thing I really like is Sandra Peters, who's an associate professor at University of Sydney. She talks about generative AI and AI chatbots as, and this is a fun analogy, as you think of them like a graduate, your assistant graduate. So they've got a lot of information. They're very smart. They're eager, know the right things to say, but not always got the substance behind. And as she might say, and I'm certainly not, no offense to any of my graduates or my beautiful students at Sydney Uni, maybe slightly cocky, maybe sometimes a little bit hungover and comes with a hallucination. And I thought that was a really fun way to think about how you work with chatbots and Gen AI, as in it's probabilistic, not deterministic. Right. It's still hallucinating. It's assistive thinking.
So probably worthwhile talking about what we mean when we talk about hallucinating in terms of the hallucination of AI as well. So hallucinations, as you quite rightly pointed out, are not helpful because they are, again, predicting the next thing, but it's not necessarily based on kind of the real context. So you can get, I think it's actually happened in certain situations in Australia where there was policy writing where that had actually caused a lot of problems because people had really not been particularly discerning and just believed whatever the AI agent had told them.
And again, this goes back to the can and should. And I think the more we think about understanding through definition, understanding what it is, and then how it can be applied and how it's structured, then allows us to look at that from a business lens and to start to say, we can rely on AI to do all our copywriting, or we can rely on AI to do all of our website marketing and copy. But should we? Because there are nuances about who we are and why we do what we do and how we operate. And so I think I'd love to pull this now into the business context and start to look at this from that business lens.
Yeah, I think it's probably dodgy territory to take the segue of hallucinating to leadership, but I'm going to do that nonetheless. And Rochelle, it was something that you mentioned there about we need to be very careful of the leadership we show now in this post-COVID world, that we've all been through the ringer in one way, shape or form, and we're now going through the ringer again because we're trying to return back to pre-COVID ways of working. What is the leadership definition of this? We're seeing a lot of leaders that feel the need to talk about AI in an intelligent way without really understanding the context. We're in an industry where command and control is still the norm for a leadership group. I think that's fair to say. So how should leaders approach the adoption, implementation of AI, and how do they take their workforce on a journey with them that makes sure that AI becomes something meaningful and sustainable and not just this year's fad?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is an incredibly exciting time, but incredibly overwhelming time to be a leader. So I think the first thing is imposter syndrome is everywhere. We feel like it's just us, but it's everywhere. It's a really disorientating time. I think first thing, really empathize with leaders. But I think there's a couple of things that leaders now need to see. They are responsible and accountable to look after your own well-being. That's going to be paramount. Your ability, your emotional intelligence, your ability to use your cognitive brain power for its greatest impact, your ability to make smart decisions, intuition and judgment are actually needed more than ever from leadership. But I think also leaders need to make some brave decisions. And the challenge is we're trying to do all of this change under enormous pressure. And it's the same in the marketing industry. We're chasing short-term revenue. We're trying to hit revenue targets, keep our businesses afloat. So we've actually got a business that needs to be transformed in 5-10 years, but we need to focus on the business of today. And then we're trying to transform. But we need to be brave. And as leaders, we need to make some tough choices about our ethical stance related to our culture and our values, but we also have to stop and pause and create the space for ourselves and for our teams. We are relearning, we are rewiring. And a wonderful example of this was Canva. Like many businesses in construction, in marketing, they're running at full pace, but they took the bold decision to have an AI discovery week. And I thought, isn't that brilliant? Every single person in the organization, leadership on the way through, 1 week. It was structured. It wasn't just 1 week off to go and search the internet and play with AI tools. There was structured. And at the back end, there was a 2-day hackathon. But that's really bold for a business of their size with their momentum and velocity to stop and pause. But I really loved what some of the lessons they got out of that. The first one was the importance of permission to hit pause. Really important for leaders. I think the other piece is around acknowledging the discomfort. Their discomfort, us being bold is going, actually, I don't know all the answers. I know strategy, I know my industry, but I don't necessarily know right now what the future's looking like and what AI might be looking like. Acknowledge the discomfort that there may be job loss. There will be job augmentation, but there will be job loss. And I think we're leaning away from that, and that's uncomfortable. But I think we need to lean into that because I don't think people are buying that narrative. And, you need to tell that story as a leader in an open and honest way. And then I think you really need to embrace those bold ideas and that diverse thinking, which, as I said at the beginning, is wonderful that you're bringing marketing industry thinkers into your thinking on construction and vice versa. We need to be thinking very holistically at a global level, all sorts of diverse eyes on what could our business look like. And again, for a leader, that's quite vulnerable to go, I don't know the answers. Leaders know the right questions, but I don't know all the answers. And the other piece I think is really important for leaders, you're going to get it wrong. Now, as leaders,
Right
we're
up
not
front. Let's just clarify that's going to happen.
going to get it wrong. This is part of the process, and we are not wired for that. Yeah, I know myself. I do everything I can when I am preparing, presenting, submitting assignments to get things perfectly right. So even I have to unlearn that mentality of having things right and perfectly polished and get back to that humble, I'm going to make some wrong choices here. You put your guardrails in place. The last thing you want to be doing is introducing more risk, but you accept you're going to get some things wrong. And that's part of the learning process. So it's an incredibly disorientating time for leaders, but let's not forget there is so much opportunity with AI. So whilst we are naturally wired to go to worst case scenario, just suspend that for a minute and say, what if AI created new opportunities for you as a leader, for your business, for your industry? Hold that thought for a second. What would you need to be doing differently? How would you need to be thinking differently, acting differently, and really lean into that? And then, of course, bring in those worst case scenarios. We've got to think about the risks. We've got to think about the ethics, think about all of those. But I do think it's a wonderful opportunity for leaders right now.
Can I just add something to that? I hear the thematics that are coming up that are very much around like values, around values and what people will in organizations, what is it that you stand for and where will you use AI and where will you absolutely not use it? Because the minute that you do that, you actually give a bit of forgiveness, I think, if to have like a point of view, you get forgiveness, I think, from your organization if you do get it wrong, because the intention is to do this in a very values-based way, which then, garners people behind you, because that's the reason why people are working for the company often in the first place. And once you get that right, you actually create more of a movement inside the organization. I've certainly seen it in one of the firms that I worked in. We were rolling out AI is to say, what is our intention? And having that point of view, it really does get people to be like, oh, now I know where I am, and I also know where, as an employee, I can add the value.
Agree. Yeah, agree.
It's an interesting perspective that one of the I think we've established very clearly now that there's some really key challenges that leaders face in the industry. But one of the roles of leaders is to cultivate future talent. And construction traditionally has again gone after this in a very structured way. We bring people in as trainees, apprentices, or graduates, and then you've got to do 2 years on site with your boots on, and then you do go here for a period of time. I think what we're seeing though is that the industry is having to embrace the first generation of digital natives. And they think very differently. They've never known a world without a device or instant access to infinite amounts of information. And that's creating a huge culture clash for construction. And we know from our future state of construction research that 96% of the construction leaders we talk to are already experiencing those generational difficulties. So how do we as construction leaders enable that generation to perform within the industry? And it probably goes even further than that. How do we make the industry attractive to that generation through the embracing of technology and things like AI? How do we overcome that barrier to the next generation becoming productive and fulfilled in our industry?
And let's not forget that generation also, some of their formative years when, from some of their brain formative years, they were in lockdown, they were in isolation. So their norm is different to the norm that we've had. And so I think there's, firstly leaning in and just challenging some of your assumptions and biases. You've got to get close to that generational cohort. When I started teaching at Sydney University, I said, I want to teach undergraduates. And everyone said to me, why would you do that? You've been the chief marketing officer at Deloitte. You should be teaching postgraduates. And I said, no, I want to do that because I want to teach them the stuff that I wish I knew when I went to university or came out of school, but I also want to learn from them. And that's been so enlightening for me and invigorating. They are an incredible generation. And I had lots of biases too. They are an incredible generation. They have big hearts, big brains. They want to make a difference. I think you got to get closer, whatever that looks like in your organization, but somehow you got to get closer and you got to bring them into the conversation. And the Australian Centre for AI in Marketing, we had a group of CMOs around the table thinking about the future of marketing. And one of my team from Sydney University came along, and so he's 17, 18 years old. He wanted to sit in the group. He said, could I come along? I'd happily just capture the notes. Like, yeah, of course, come along. And then we're having the conversation, and suddenly the light bulb went off and went, oh my gosh, Ryan, you should be in this conversation. What were we thinking? We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your ideas. So I think co-designing, listening both ways, co-designing, and really you've got to park your thinking about what was, how we were all groomed and grew up, and our formative years in business is not going to be their experience. So you have to take that time to think about, well, then what could it look like? And what will a business look like when it's human plus? You know, when roles are being replaced, and they will, by not just one piece of digital. It might be 5 agents delivering those tasks. And then now what does that look like? What does that look like for your culture, etc.? I think my final point on this one, that generation also brings a lot from a cultural perspective. Now, I know at Deloitte, it was that generation that would be immediately organizing the morning teas. They'd have great team building ideas, etc. And so you've also got to take a step back and think, what else can this generation bring that is additive to this period of time we're going through? So a couple of thoughts from me on that.
Yeah. I think from my side, one of the things that this democratization of all this knowledge has caused is this kind of breakdown of what was a strange hierarchical model where only people at the top had the information and everybody else down below. It's a bit like, in the Middle Ages, some people had access to libraries and other people didn't, So I'm like, there's an opportunity here to take a lot of those people who have a lot of knowledge in the industry and actually to work side by side with some of these new employees or graduates and things, in order to kind of, as you said, co-design. There's so much opportunity around, the crossover of those that experience at the top end of the spectrum, and also the kind of redeployment as well. Like, people who know a lot about your organization should not be forced to retire. They should be redeployed to train agents so that they can get like this best-in-class information out to these people who are onboarding to this job so that they can get access to that.
Let's talk about that, because this is something we actually have talked about in other interviews when we looked at the Future State of Construction report and the future of workforce. We have some employers who are hiring back retired workers for that very reason.
Yeah.
And they're looking at not only through dictation capturing that knowledge in order to inform their large language model, but they're also through technology and the readiness of, meta glasses and other ways. Somebody junior can be in the field doing the work with somebody senior in the comfort of their own environment, educating them. Well, let's look to your left. Well, let's look. Okay, this is, and in fact, just giving that knowledge back to the industry. So let's talk a little bit about that. Where have you seen some of this apply to business where roles are changing and some of these roles that we have today will shift? And we often say it will, and we have said on this podcast, we don't believe AI will take work from individuals. We think it'll add to the work they're doing. But I don't know if that's accurate. What's the more accurate way of looking at this? Do you have examples of ways that you're seeing AI actually redeploy individuals into doing work?
It's probably worth just referencing back to a first use case that I ever worked on with AI back in 2022, I think it was, like kind of on the cusp of when ChatGPT was coming out. So ingesting, like thinking about the business that we're in, which is very much around, reducing risk and helping people make better decisions, we ingested a risk manual. Now, this thing was like 800 pages long. Not many people, I reckon, had read that cover to cover, just between you and I. And people were getting, they're up at like 11 o'clock at night working on a document thinking, am I doing the right thing with this data in terms of what our risk policy says? And they were like then having to either call somebody, but 11 o'clock at night is not a great time to ring someone to ask them what they could deem a silly question, right? And that makes you feel dumb.
Yeah.
And so again, the democratization of like being able to give somebody a piece of information like a policy document and allow them to ask any question, silly or not silly, so that then you can actually enable them to make better decisions 24 hours a day, not relying on emailing somebody and waiting for them to respond. These are some of the bottlenecks and things that have been happening. And so just circling back to the original question, I think, there's a lot of things you can do that are quite simple to start with. So don't be overlooking the obvious is what I would say. You have a lot of the data inside your organization, including knowledge in people's heads.
Yeah.
Rochelle, you mentioned something earlier, which again I thought was fascinating, which is about the fear associated with AI. And I think there is an understanding that roles will change. I think history has proven to us that when we adopt a new technology, we don't necessarily lose huge amounts of workers from the workplace, but things do change. Can we yet foresee where AI might take us to in the future so that we can understand the path that we as humans might be on in that changing space? I mean, what can we yet forecast what AI will and will not be able to do even 5 years in the future so that we can plan the ongoing development of us as humans to complement the increased capability we get from AI?
Yes, wow. Well, let me look into my crystal ball. No, the fear is real, and I hear it so much now, this term AI anxiety. It doesn't exist in a literal sense in neuroscience. There is no category of AI anxiety, but I wonder if there may be one coming. So it's anyone suffering from that and feeling the fear. First thing I want to say is that's a very natural and appropriate response to the situation we're in. So certainly it's something that I think is worth acknowledging if you're feeling that, and just being aware of then how's that impacting your behavior. Are you either just leaning away from AI and saying, not me, not on my watch, that sort of terminology that people say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Are you leaning away from it because you're fearful, or the opposite? Are you trying to cover for that fear and you're actually talking about AI, but you don't quite know what you're talking about because you're worried about this imposter? So I think the first thing is just quietly acknowledge, am I fearful? If yes, perfectly fine. Now, what actions are you going to take to start to address that? What can you do? Where can you start to learn? Where can you start to grow that experience? I think it's starting to lean into the fear, because when we're in a fear base, we don't make great decisions and we don't behave in the best way. So you got to get yourself out of that fear way, the amygdala hijack, as many people would refer to it. Get yourself out of that mode, try and get yourself back into an even keel, and reframing what the AI opportunity is for your business, your organization. And I think it does look different for different businesses and within different industries. Now, there's certainly plenty of tools out there. And I think if you just do a quick Google on will my AI, will my job exist in 5 years, 10 years, there's lots of tools where you can pop your job description in, and there's been pretty good thinking and research that's been done around what roles will or won't exist. It's still nuanced. When you think about copywriting, of course, you can pop things into Claude and ChatGPT, you can train it on your tone, your brand's personality, and you can get high quality content. Sure. But does that necessarily mean that your copywriter, who has worked in your business for a while, that knows the nuances of the business, that really what's topical right now, does that mean you should just replace that role? All of the research would tell you it's out. But is that the right choice for the individual that you have? And, think about the business, but the individual, and also, and this is where I think we're going to start hiring differently, not just on skills. I see a future state where we might be bringing in some technology like EEG machines, and we understand, how do you think? Are you the type of person that can rewire your thinking? And then I think as leaders, then you need to start thinking about the choices you want to make as an organization. Where are the roles that you're going to need for where you are going, not just what the stats or the research is telling us. And I do really think, I said before, I think leaders getting into a futurist mindset or bringing a futurist into the C-suite, I think is an interesting concept. Does your chief strategy officer now become a futurist? Well, that's a unique skill set. But those people that are actually skilled in understanding those early signals that they're picking up now, those crazy ideas that everyone says, that will never happen. Like when I worked in online travel back in 1996, and some people were like, it's going to go online. And there was many a person going, you've got to be kidding me. There is no way I would ever trust a computer to book a holiday for me. It was this crazy idea at first, but now it's the norm. So I think having those people that are skilled in understanding where are the early signals, helping you scenario plan, and actually they probably need to be people from outside of your business and probably organizations such as some of the consultants. This might be a valuable place to bring that outside in thinking for you to understand what roles will or will not be needed for your business.
One question that I'm thinking as we're talking about this and kind of like the recalibration of workforce and skills is, what does it mean to be intelligent in the age of AI? And construction as an industry has historically really valued the skill of craftspeople. Majority of the building industry has been their individuals who can build with their hands, and sometimes in traditional academic settings, were not the best students. And in fact, there's over 40% of those in the construction industry are actually neurodivergent. So if we think about intelligence in this way, and I love what you're talking about, the value of that human intelligence, what do you think that means for leaders when they're thinking about the skills that their new hires or that their existing leaders need to have? What does it mean to be intelligent in this age of AI?
Can we do another podcast?
It sounds like, well, I'm going to need you.
Gosh, can I have a go?
Sure.
So already we have your IQ, your EQ, your emotional intelligence. I think that's going to need to be dialed up. I've touched on that before. I think we're going to be all under an enormous pressure. So having emotional intelligence, being able to create psychological safe workplaces through your emotional intelligence, incredibly important. There's a really interesting wave of intelligence that's being talked about at the moment. Linda Ray of Neurocapability was where I first heard about it, of attentional intelligence. And so this as a superpower of leaders and businesses, their ability to focus. You as a leader or you as a team member, your ability to focus, there's lots of distractions. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I could just sit on ChatGPT and go down that rabbit hole 24/7. So there is more distractions coming our way. So how do you as an individual focus? How do you as leaders get your teams to focus? And then how do you get either your industry or your clients to focus on you? I think attentional intelligence is a really, really interesting space that's emerging that we need to think about. And then you talked about neurodiversity. Oh my gosh, I am super excited about organizations embracing neurodiversity. Passionately believe that we need all sorts of brains to solve for some of these challenges we have. Now that means we need to re-engineer the way we work and our working environments, because I've yet to really see a company that is set up for neurodivergent workers in A, how they measure performance, B, the working environment, C, the mentorship for those individuals. So I think there's an incredible opportunity there. And if indeed that is the portfolio, the profile of some people through the construction industry, wow, what an opportunity.
Yep.
Because those brains think differently, and that
Yeah.
should not be punished. That should be embraced.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We see it as a strength, I believe, but I don't know if the industry has recognized that as a strength. And so it's great to hear you say that. I hate to do this, but we're running out of time because I do feel like we could have an entire another conversation. But I do want to ask one look ahead question. And then Andy has 5 rapid fire questions for you that we do at the end of each podcast. If there is one thing you could pick, each of you, what excites you about an AI-powered future, what would that be?
For me, it's absolutely what we were just talking about. It's about taking a lot of this divergent thinking across organizations and actually turning inward and understanding that, looking at the technology is not necessarily the answer. We need to look inside our organizations and see the strengths that we already have. And I see a little bit like, a hybrid car. You have, the old combustion engine is, the incredible engine that's brought us to where we are today in terms of our employees who are the strength behind any company, and the artificial intelligence, which is the ability for the electric to turn on when it needs to and do a lot of that heavy lifting. So, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to look inside the organization and recognize the strengths of people, neurodivergent and otherwise, and really think about how can we group these people by strength or, as you were saying, by different types of thinking so that we can really redeploy a lot of that into the workforce, augmented by artificial intelligence, because that's really where the power sits. And then let's not forget, there's this huge other perfect storm coming with robotics in this industry, where if you think about human knowledge plus artificial intelligence plus the robotics side, I mean, this is absolutely bigger than the Industrial Revolution as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely a massive game changer. So, that's what excites me.
It's good to hear that from an outsider, isn't it? Because we feel it on the inside. And how about for you, Rochelle?
Looks similarly. I mean, you probably felt my energy lift when we talked about neurodivergency, and I think, workplaces where all sorts of brains can thrive excites me enormously. But specific to marketing, and really what caused us to set up the Australian Centre for AI and Marketing was this common feeling of marketing's lost its way a little bit. We've actually got too caught up in data and analytics, and I think there's something beautiful about AI plus marketers getting back to creativity, insightful, and how can marketers plus AI actually lift the value that marketing brings to organizations? I'm really excited about what that's going to look like. I'm concerned about headlines, and I'm sure everyone's feeling the same. You open up your computer, you get the instant news feeds of job cuts and AI coming for your jobs, and I'm so concerned about that type of media from the clickbait media that is just perpetuating this fear. So that's really what concerns me.
It's the invitation, isn't it, to step up and lead in this next AI chapter, with a human-centered lens. Like I really think about artificial intelligence and the work that I do as human-centered AI, not as technology-led. Whereas, the picture that the media paints around this, let's not let them lead this conversation. They're not technology or change experts. Let's be fair, they're in the business of selling a headline. And so, really getting back to the fact that, we need to lead with humans at the center of the conversation, and step in and lead the conversations in our own companies. Otherwise, the risk of doing nothing is letting a completely different picture be painted, just like, how we started out with the internet.
Yes.
But it, was meant to democratize a whole lot of knowledge. And then it turned into something completely different because, different forces got a hold of it at the end of the day.
Yep. And I think that perfectly brings back to the opening question about what we can do versus what we should do. And I love this concept of human-centered AI, because if there's one thing that construction is poised to do, it's to unlock the capability within the people that do this work, because the people that choose to work in the construction industry are truly amazing individuals with so much capacity. And I think in this new world we're talking about, especially human-centered AI, I think some of the skills that they've traditionally not been valued for will become even more valuable. So thank you both so much for joining us today. But before we let you go, this is something we'd ask each of our questions. I'm going to let Andy take it away, our rapid fire questions.
So we haven't prepped you on this. I'll go alternate. No thinking time at all, just a reaction.
Yeah.
So Fiona, for you, first of all, what book would you most recommend?
Oh, at the moment, I'm actually reading a book called Lessons in Creativity by somebody called Ben Rennie. And I think that the thing that we most have the opportunity to change about, AI and how it all turns out for every one of us, including the construction industry, is the mindset and intention that we come to it with. So design thinking is absolutely where my brain goes when I think about great books.
Love that. Rochelle, I think I might know the answer to this, but what is your go-to information source for gaining a different perspective on things?
I gotta say, I like Scott Galloway. Now, he's controversial, which is why I like him. Different perspective. So, professor of marketing at NYU, successful business owner. He's got very bold views on many things, including AI. You have to make your own decision, but I think I really love him for a different perspective. And then Andrew Huberman Labs. I love Andrew Huberman, the way that he's a professor at Stanford University, a professor in ophthalmology, and he brings neuroscience into the everyday world. And so I love his different way of thinking about humans and human behaviors with a neuroscience lens.
Fantastic. And thank goodness your answer to that question wasn't ChatGPT. Moving swiftly on. Fiona, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say that it would be to show up authentically with your vulnerability as your superpower.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. And finally, for Rochelle, I think we've talked about this a bit already, but one particular innovation that you think will happen in the field of AI that will most impact the construction industry.
Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe I might talk to you can I slightly reframe it around what's coming through in neuroscience as an interesting area to be thinking about. And I think that's this concept of, we talked about assistive thinking before, but cognitive offloading. And I'm finding this a really interesting area, as in, when do you transfer your thinking to artificial intelligence? At what points in the process is that appropriate? At the beginning, maybe through ideation, or is it at the end? There's a lot of research and discussion on this of when do you, and how valuable is cognitive offloading. So actually, and there's a tipping point, because if you outsource too much of your thinking to artificial intelligence, there's concern about cognitive atrophy. So we start to lose those neural pathways. So I actually think this is going to be a really interesting area that's going to impact the construction industry and all of industry, is cognitive offloading. How and when do you offload some of your thinking to artificial intelligence, and that frees you up for higher order thinking? But if you do it too much, what's going to happen to our brains? And we're going to start to experience atrophy. So that's I think, kind of watch this space thinking for me.
That's fantastic. There's so many things, so many terms I've learned today. Now I've got to go and research.
Good, because we did want this to be partially educational.
Absolutely. Thank you for those answers.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think one of the things that's always exciting for us in the construction industry is to look outside and peek over the wall of our industry into other industries and to see what other lessons can be learned. And you both actually opened that door up for us today to learn a lot. So thank you both for joining us. Thank you, Andy, for being my co-host.
My pleasure.
I hope I can come back again.
Of course, anytime.
We'll have another one of these. And for those of you who are watching, thank you, and listening. Thank you for listening and joining us today. If anything that we talked about here resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll keep bringing you the stories of leaders who are building our future, harnessing the power of construction.